Welcome to Let's Get Into It. I am your host, Sherelle Higgins. Let's Get Into It is a safe space to have real conversations that are meant to uplift, encourage, and let you know you are not the only one dealing with life. Each episode of Let's Get Into It is designed to provide illuminating and thought-provoking information on a variety of topics. In fact, no topic is off limit. If you would like to see a topic discussed, please feel free to make a recommendation. My special guest and I will have a great time discussing topics that the mainstream media wouldn't dare discuss. We will bring these conversations to you with an open mind, respectfully, from different perspectives, and most importantly, with love. Thank you for joining me and my special guest. Now, let's get into it. Hello. I am Sherelle Higgins. I am the host of Let's Get Into It. And today we are going to get into it. We are going to talk about therapy. Yes, therapy. We all need some. And so before we get into that, I just want to remind everybody it is voting season. Please check to see when you can start early voting. In the state of Virginia, early voting starts tomorrow. And yes, I will be taking me, my husband, and my son to the polls tomorrow. We are not going to procrastinate on this thing. We have to get out there and we have to vote. Voting is a privilege, it is a right, and we should remember that some of our ancestors did not have this privilege or right. And we must also remember the challenges that they went through trying to get to the polls to vote. So, if you can't vote early, please make sure you go vote on November the 5th. I'm not going to say vote like your life depends on it. What I am going to say is that your life depends on you voting. So please plan to vote. Now, I want to introduce you to my next guest. I met her a couple of months ago and she and I clicked. I really like her spirit, her personality. She's a lot of fun and she's authentic. And you know, I like authentic people, no pretenses. And so I will introduce you to Monica Lester. She is a clinical social worker with nearly 2 decades of experience cultivating healthy relationships with clients that nurture a sense of trust, commitment, and in communication, establishing a safe, non-judgmental environment where individuals feel heard, understood, and respected has become a core component to facilitating growth and change. As a licensed medical health professional, Dr. Monica recognizes the interconnectedness of mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual well being and has learned the importance of taking a holistic approach to therapy. Therefore, she has created a wellness model. The wellness model utilizes strengths based, person centered approaches that capture the multiple dimensions of health, which can promote overall resilience and balance for individuals and families. This approach helps develop sustainable habits and routines that support long term wellness and resilience, but also aids in the development of self management skills and coping strategies needed to navigate challenges within an evolving society. So join me in welcoming Dr. Monica. Welcome, Dr. Monica.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you on. I think this is a very important topic. And so I'm going to jump right into my questions. And I think we got to lay some groundwork first, a little bit of foundation so that people understand what we're talking about when we start getting into the meat of therapy. So, what type of education, Dr. Monica, do you need to be a licensed therapist?
Okay. So there is quite a bit of a journey. So the journey starts with pursuing your degree in social work or counseling. I'm a little biased because I'm a social worker. And so I got my undergrad in social work, and then I got my master's in social work. And then after you get your master's in social work, you have to sit for the exam, which is the graduate level. And so at that level, you pass the exam, and then you have to practice in the field. And while you're practicing in this field, right, you have to get 3,000 hours of practice, and you have to be supervised by a licensed clinical social worker before you can even sit for the clinical exam. So, yes, it was a process, but I made it through. I absolutely love what I do. You don't necessarily need a doctorate degree to be a licensed clinical social worker, but I'm an overachiever a little bit. And so I continued on to get a doctorate degree. So, but it's not necessary. But yeah.
That's probably why we connected right out the gate because I'm an overachiever too. I'm trying to get rid of that though. I just want to achieve, because
Yeah.
being an overachiever is a heavy burden.
Too much.
So,
Don't do it.
are licensed therapists allowed to practice in any state, or is it a state by state license?
Yeah, great question. Great question. So it is a state by state license. And so typically, as a social worker, we can get reciprocity from state to state. So for myself, I took my exam in the District of Columbia, passed it. I'm a clinical social worker, but I also wanted to be licensed in the state of Maryland. So what I had to do was fill out all the forms, pay all the money, and then what happens is there's a board, and we request the board to send our license scores to the next state. They review it, say yeah, usually it's yay, and then they stamp it, and then we're licensed in that state. And then for each state we have to pay I think it's like every 2 years, to renew our license, and making sure that we're keeping up with our what's called continuing education units. So that's the one good thing about the profession that I really like, is because as a licensed clinical therapist, like every 2 years, trust me, I am in the classroom learning new things. There's new policies and things like that that's coming out, and we have to be well versed on it as we're servicing clients. So yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm actually up for renewal at the end of October for the state of Maryland. So, yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. I didn't know. I mean, I figured you probably needed to renew. I didn't realize it was every I mean, that often. So,
Hmm.
okay. So, are therapists required to maintain confidentiality?
Yes, it is the backbone of the work that we do. And that's one of the conversations that I typically have with the clients that I'm working with, is confidentiality, right? So, even in working in the schools, like I tell the students, right? What you say to me is confidential. However, there is a caveat. So, and this is what it is. If you say to me that you are going to harm yourself or harm someone else, my goal is to make sure that everyone is safe. So I don't need your permission to reach out to get you the necessary support or resources or services that will help benefit you. So with that, I have to report. And if I know any instances of child abuse and neglect, I have to report. I can't keep that in confidence. And so I have to share that as well. Yeah.
Okay. And so, what made you want to follow this line of work?
Great question. So as I was, and here's the thing, I didn't take the traditional route. Was a great student in high school, got excellent grades. But straight out of high school, I was working for the government. So I was doing my thing. I was like, yeah, I don't need to go to school. Skirt, figured out, I want to do something different. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to go. And I was going, taking all these general education classes in community college. And I realized like I really like supporting people. I really like engaging with people. And so my first pick was psychology. But I had a really good advisor who sat me down and kind of explained like the difference and the different career paths. And he was like, I think you would be a great social worker. I was like, I don't want to be no social worker. My first thought was all they do is take people's kids. I don't want to do that. Right. So I learned like, no, that's not what they just do. And so after start taking my classes, I absolutely loved it. Went on to get my master's degree, my license, worked in a bunch of different areas to try to figure out what's my niche, like what population I like to work with. And believe it or not, it was children and families. And so I'm working in the school system now. I absolutely love it. It's a lot, but I do love it. But part time, I do private practice. And so that's where I work with my adults, primarily Black women. And so I love the work that I do with that
Okay.
population.
So, what do you think are the most important traits for therapists?
Ah, everybody can't be me. um, but one of the things I think is being a active listener. And so active listening is not just about, it is about listening for understanding, but it's also about the body language, right? Making sure that your clients know that you're with them. It's the nods, it's the body language, it's the leaning in, right? So all of that. So I think that's one thing. Also, too, being able to engage people in a way that is comfortable, being able to communicate to individuals where they understand, right? Sometimes, right, some of my colleagues, right, I've been in the field for a while, they use terminology that throws clients off. They don't know what they're talking about. It's very confusing, it's frustrating. I don't want to do that. Like it doesn't make any sense. So I like to bring, my authentic self because I'm a real person first. And I just like my clients to know that this is who I am authentically, and you decide if you want to work with me because that's what's most important. So typically what I do is I do a consult so they can get to know me. It's really important when you have a conversation with someone and you can ask those questions, and see if it's a good fit. And so I typically do that. Um, and I go from there. So yeah.
Okay. Now, I would add to that compassion.
Yes.
I can only imagine. I mean, me being a person who like to help other people too, I think compassion is an important characteristic just to have in general, right? Regardless as to what your occupation is, um, because without compassion, it won't go right.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, and I don't even know how I missed that, but I literally just had a whole conversation about my compassion and my passion and like how it speaks to like my character and just who I am and how I come across. Yeah. And just being very thoughtful. I'm a very intentional person. So when I am having a conversation with you, I am intentional. I'm listening, I'm hearing, I'm making sure that I'm connected in a way that you know that I'm connected, even if I'm not even saying anything. And so that's all about validation for people, and we all need that. So, yeah.
So you mentioned you work in the school system and you like working with the children and their families. God bless you. Because I couldn't work with the children or their families because that's a whole lot right now in 2024. But, and then you talked about the adults. Do you also do um, adult family counseling and couples counseling, those types of different areas?
So currently, I'm just doing individual counseling. I've been thinking and teetering and tottering about like the couples work. So I'm thinking about it. But primarily, I'm doing individual counseling. And like I said, my niche is that I target is Black women. So that's who is on my client caseload right now for private practice. And so I have I have one young person, female, who is on my caseload for private practice that I've been trying to ease out, but she won't let me go, because all of the clients that I take now are primarily women. So I really enjoy that work. Yeah.
Well, that's because you're doing such a great job and they see the value in it and they have connected to you that they like, I need to keep coming.
Yeah.
And, you know, with the high levels of divorce, obviously people need couples counseling because I don't know what people think marriage is, but as soon as they find out what it might be, they separate and they get
Mhm.
a divorce. So that is an area that I think a lot of people could benefit from. Um, so why should people seek out counseling?
Right. So, counseling or therapy is about your healing journey. It is individual and unique to you. And I think that it's important to have like that, unbiased space that you can go to and really try to open up about those things that you need to really talk through, right? A lot of times, individuals, like, everything is always in their head, right? And so you ruminate, but nothing's coming out of here. And then what happens is you internalize, right? And you just beat it down and beat it down. But trust and believe it always surfaces, and in a way that's not pretty, right? It usually comes out ugly. And so I always encourage individuals to seek therapy. And the key point about therapy is what we just talked about, is finding that connection, right? Because every therapist is not for everyone. And so when you're seeking therapy, first of all, you should know what type of therapist or person that you like to connect with, right? And so that is when you start your journey, and do consults, because consults should be, typically they're free. So you can do a consult with a therapist to get to know them, have your questions out, because that is going to make all the difference in the world, is when you connect with a good therapist, um, and start your healing journey. That is so important.
Yeah, that was my next question. Because I know that everybody is not for everybody. And so it's important to find somebody who you can connect with, who you do feel comfortable with, who you feel so comfortable with that you're willing to share all of those suppressed feelings without judgment.
Yep.
And so I was definitely going to ask you that question. So is therapy for everyone, or does it depend on the issue?
I think therapy is for everyone. And I think everyone can use a little bit of therapy because, again, it is about you. We all have days, moments, times in our life where we could seek to, one, verbalize what that feels like for you, and connect with another person to verbalize and come up with different strategies or interventions. And just the fact to know that you're not alone in this healing process, I think, is what's so important.
Do you think it's easier for women to seek out therapy versus men, or men versus women?
In my experience, I think it's easier for women. However, in having some male clients, like, they tend to be a little bit more open and responsive when it comes to, like, the connection after they've made the connection. And I'm saying this because in the school system, hands down, the males, the boys, are way easier to connect with and engage with than my female students. Like, once they're in, right? You hook them. I feel like in schools, the females are a little bit more difficult. However, as you matriculate, right, through the different stages of development, like the adult women that I have coming now, it's like they're ready. So they, day one, they're ready. They're in and they're laying it out. So once you're
That's because
ready,
they done been through so much
right.
that they just can't carry no more. And so we have a great question here. I'm gonna see if I can put, yes, it's on the screen. Does Dr. Monica have a therapist?
I do have a therapist, not a traditional therapist, but I do have a therapist, because remember, I am a human first, and I go through things just like everybody else. So I have my person, and my person know who you are, And so, yes, I connect because that's important. Absolutely.
Yes.
And because I'm a therapist, I have a host of therapist friends. So at any given time, I just hit the button and they're right there and we're all in. So it's a good thing.
I've always heard, because I used to do, and I guess I probably still do, reluctantly, life coaching.
Hmm.
And so a coach need a coach. And so I'm glad we had that question asked, because it's important for people to know that your job is, it's just not about you servicing other people. It's also to make sure that you get serviced as well,
Absolutely.
so that you could be in a better place to service other people. Thank you for
Absolutely.
that question, Marquita.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
So, what are some of the most common reasons people seek out therapy?
Ooh. I would say probably the biggest reason they don't come into therapy saying that this is the issue, but it always leads back to childhood trauma. That is huge. But typically, when they're coming into therapy, it's usually relationship issues, as you
Mm,
talked about. It's usually relationship issues, a history of anxiety, or a history of depression. Those three things is typically what they come in for. But I guarantee you, before it's all said and done, we are all the way back where it started, and then we're coming forward. And so for some, it takes a little while to kind of get there, but yeah, those usually are the top three that I've seen that they come into therapy for.
I'm not surprised about the childhood trauma,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm also not surprised about the the relationship aspect.
Yeah.
Um, I probably would think that people, well, I don't think this, I would recommend, particularly in 2024, that more parents seek out therapy about how they should be parenting these kids in 2024, because we know that these kids are out of control, and it's not the kids' fault, it's the parents' fault, right?
Right.
And so I think parents should seek out parental therapy so that they can learn some tools and strategies before it's too late to, kind of help them navigate, being a better parent.
Yep. Agreed. And because I work in the school system, and that's a good point that you raised too, because a lot of the students that I'm working with typically have what's called an individual education plan or some kind of plan. And so they seek, for me as a social worker, I provide what's called the behavioral support services. And so, with that being said, I am providing this service to the student in the school so that they can access the general education curriculum and be successful, blah, blah, blah. Well, we know that the students are coming in with so much trauma, so many other things and environmental factors that are happening, right? Home life issues, you name it, they're coming in with all of these things. And so I am servicing these kids, but the hardest part is I am servicing the kid, but the parent is not present or not, involved, right? And
Participating.
so one of my pushes, right, if I could, right, if I could lead it all, I would say I can only service the kids whose parents are going to participate, because what the parents say is, this is what I want. Like, Dr. Lester, I want you to service my kid because he needed. So the messaging is, Dr. Lester,
I
you
want
fix
you to fix it.
it. You have the expertise. You're the expert. Fix him. Ma'am, he's 14. There's a lot of time, right? A lot of foundational things that's been laid, and I'm doing my best, right? So,
Mm,
but they do
yeah.
not participate, and so that's the hardest part, is we don't have the parental like interactions that we need to participate. So,
Yeah, I don't know where we got off the train, particularly in our community, where, the way our parents raised us.
mhm,
There's no way we could have got away with 95% of the stuff that these kids are doing today.
right,
Um, and one of the things that I reflect back on often is one of the rules that my mother had for her daughters is, don't have that school calling me on my job
right,
because you up there acting a fool.
right,
Like, basic rule. We all knew it. We could all recite it, and we all knew don't have even the teachers. A lot of the teachers, when by the time we got to high school, a lot of the teachers were students at this high school with our parents,
Mm,
right? So they've been knowing each other. Even the teachers was like, I don't want to call your parents up here because they knew it was going to be some trouble when they got there. And
right,
so I don't know where we got off. I guess No Child Left Behind somewhere, or and instead of No Child Left Behind, we left all the kids behind. And
yep,
so I just don't know. And there was just certain rules that we knew that we couldn't break. And kids don't have any respect for rules now. And the parents support that,
right,
right? There's no consequences to the kids when they break the rules, particularly at school,
right,
right? And so we knew, and my kids knew. I used those same rules. Don't
right,
have nobody call me on my job because you at the school acting a fool. Don't fall off the monkey bars. Don't slip and fall and bust your head open. Don't be up
right,
there acting crazy. Don't be talking back, getting smart, all of that, right? But
right,
if you are as a child, if you are doing it at the house, then you can expect to be doing it at the school.
right.
Um,
Absolutely.
so back in the day, people, particularly African Americans, would just say someone was crazy,
Oh,
right?
hmm,
And seeking out therapy had a stigma.
hmm.
Are you seeing a shift in our community towards the stigma of getting therapy?
I have seen a shift, and I do believe that there is a shift. One of the things that I noticed, like in just in the school system alone, with that population, they are more open and more receptive to the idea and the language of like mental health. Like, what does
Mhm.
that mean, right? And I think it has a lot to do with, these times are very different. It's being talked about. You see it everywhere. You have social workers in school. When I was in school, I don't even remember counselors or anything like that.
We
So
didn't need them. We had our parents.
right, 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 that part. So the messaging is there, even for the adults. Like, one of the things that I can say is the adults are reaching out for services, especially in the Black community, especially with Black women. And part of the problem is like access to resources. And with our community, we want to talk to people that look like us, right? So,
Absolutely.
because that is the case, they got to find us. But the problem is when they find us, if you're looking for me, like, I'm full. So I'm not taking any clients at this time, but like that's what they're running into. And I get it all the time. Like, it's so interesting, like on my profile, people are still reaching out, even though my profile says like I'm not accepting any new clients. They're still pushing. And so that's the part for me where I'm just like, oh, I'm a bleeding heart. And so sometimes I'll open it up and then sometimes I'm like, what are you doing? But one of the things that I really want to do to kind of do more community work so that I can see more people, right? So right now I'm doing individual, but I really want to kind of step out there and start doing healing circles or somatic movement exercises, like different things, because talk therapy is one thing, but I like to look at a holistic approach to healing, right? If that means meditation, if that's somatic body movement, if that's meditation, if that's sitting in a healing circle, supporting one another, and having this space where we connect and talk about the things, you know, all of the things that are happening. Like, that's some of the work that I definitely want to transition into so that I can see more people, because the individual work is great, but I feel like I can maximize like the support and the knowledge and experience that I have. And we can all learn from others because the validation is so key
Yeah,
in our community. Yeah.
absolutely. And
Mhm.
so with the when you started talking about bringing more people together, like in a healing circle, the first thing I thought about was group therapy.
Yeah.
Um, and so with and I believe that with group therapy, particularly if people have like mental health challenges, that they can benefit from each other. And
Yep.
so um and I have heard people struggle with trying to find a therapist because everybody is so booked up. And
Mhm.
so you if there's a person listening and they have had trouble finding a therapist because everybody seems to be booked, what's the next best thing that they can do?
So the next best thing that they can do is, because I've been seeing a lot of different links and things like that for like Black mental health, these different organizations and agencies that are kind of coming together. Because I know I get a lot of push to, hey, join our circle so we can put you on our list serve, like, because they know our community is reaching out. So that's definitely one way, is to kind of seek out that way. But also, if you have health insurance, that's another way. Like, one of the other ways is you tap into your health insurance, see who accepts your health insurance, and kind of go through that resource as well. Um, Other than that, like, kind of look around in the community to see if there's healing circles, and that's the piece that I want to kind of tap into, because I think that is a missing piece for people, because sometimes some individuals may not want every week or every 2 week I got this session with a therapist, but I like to call it like download sessions, where you need a download session. Dr. Lester is having one on September the 20th. Like, come and see her, right? People will come, right? So those are kind of some of the ideas that I'm kind of thinking about to bring more people, like community, into it, because money is another part, right? Because
Mhm.
yeah, you may have the insurance. We all know some people's copays may be more, or they don't have the insurance. And so what does that look like? Because therapy isn't cheap, right? But there's a way to kind of make this happen and bring it to the community where everyone is being serviced. So yeah, so I'm kind of thinking through different ways.
Does most therapists accept insurance?
Um, some is
Oh,
self-pay. Like, I have a colleague right now. She does couples counseling. It's out of pocket. Like, she charges a flat fee for like that couples counseling. For me, I take insurances, so it's just a little easier on the clients when you just have the copay. So, but even with the insurances, that's the other trick bag too, because everything is about the money. So even with the different insurances that I accept, everybody pays differently. I'm giving you the same service. So I may have some Medicaid clients, I may have Blue Cross Blue Shield clients, John Hopkins clients. I'm getting different amounts from each one of these insurance companies because they
mhm.
pay different amounts, which is frustrating for a clinician because, well, I'm doing the same. Now they regulating my money, but that's how it works, right? So it's just unfortunate. And so that's why, I'm thinking about building a brand where I can get out into the community and do more, to service our community, because we need it. And we're looking. That's the thing. We're looking. So
Okay. I have another question in the chat. It says, have you noticed an increase in people seeking therapy since the pandemic?
absolutely. Talking about somebody who was on fire during the pandemic. I had so many clients during the pandemic because we were all inside, right? So I started taking on all these clients because I was in the house. So I could just see Saturday, Sunday, or every evening of the week. And so more people started to reach out. And I think it goes back to that lack of connectedness, that lack of like not being able to verbalize, to be out in the community, to express yourself. And if you've already was suffering or having some issues, like, that pandemic only exacerbated what was already there, right? And so the good thing is, one of the good things that happened with the insurance is they created this whole telehealth, right? And so convenient, everybody's showing up for services. And so that was like one of the greatest things that kind of came out of the pandemic. So much so we're like now therapists are overwhelmed because they're like, wow, now, you know, our clients are like, where are they? Like, all booked up because everybody started connecting during the pandemic, and now they won't let you go because they're finding the benefit in it, which is a great thing. So I love
Yeah,
that.
that was a great question. That was one of my questions I was going to ask you about.
Yeah.
Um, so, how would you describe? Somebody said we had group therapy during the pandemic. Yes, absolutely, we sure did.
Yeah.
Look, every day.
Right, right, right. And
Yes,
yeah,
go no, go
yeah.
ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I love group therapy. Group therapy is what I do in the schools because it just makes more sense in terms of maximizing my time in the school because, you know, we're stuck to certain time frames. And so what comes out of group dynamics is a wonderful thing, right? They're learning from each other, they're engaged. And oftentimes, I don't even have to say that much. It's like, ta-da, right? And it's so many things that happen. So I absolutely love group work. So that's why I'm looking into it.
Okay, and what should people expect to achieve by seeking out and participating in therapy or counseling?
I think it's an individual journey, and I think it depends on the person. Um, who, when you're going into therapy with this expectation, I don't know if that is good because you know you're
Mm,
going in with this preconceived notion that if I talk to her I should be good in like 8 weeks. Not necessarily, because what's going to start to happen is if you're really and truly doing your work, you are going to start unpacking things, and sometimes you feel worse off than when you even started therapy. But trust the process because that is the work. So what I say is, don't really go in with this expectation that all is going to be well, but you go in knowing I am starting my healing journey today,
mm,
and this is where I am, and that is okay. And that's how you move through therapy, but not with these expectations of, oh, I have to do this, or I have to, or I should be here this time. No.
mm.
Interesting
So,
because I had one client who was a therapist, and it was, I mean, that was a lot of work. A therapist, a
you know,
therapist is a client, it's a lot.
I can imagine because they, as they say about doctors and nurses are the worst patients. So
Yes.
I can imagine it being the same kind of concept. And
Yes.
I keep hearing you use this terminology,
What's that?
healing journey.
Yep.
And so that brought me to a thought of it's a journey, not a destination.
Absolutely.
And doing the work. And so it's important to know that healing happens over time.
Yep.
And depending on how much you have to unpack determines how long the journey is.
Yep.
It might be a journey that take you the rest of your life if you've had a traumatic childhood, right? A
Yep.
traumatic young adulthood, a traumatic middle agehood, a traumatic older agehood. Like it just, if you got a lot to unpack, it may take you the rest of your life to be on the healing journey.
Yep.
And so I really wanted to emphasize those words because I think a lot of people may expect that, okay, I'm gonna go to counseling, get therapy, and then I'm just going to be fixed in whatever amount of time that they think.
Yep.
Um, so, Dr. Monica, talk to us a little bit more about your wellness model.
Okay, so it goes back to a little bit when I was talking earlier in terms of the wellness model, right? So, with this idea of this wellness model, it is an approach to like all of the different aspects of our life. So, I'm talking spiritual, social, intellectual, financial,
Mm,
environmental, um, what is it, physical, like it makes up all of these things in our life, right? And so sometimes when we zoom out and we really process, where am I, like what are those areas that I feel like I need to kind of target, or what is the priority? It may be the financial wellness, it may be the social, it may be the emotional. And so some of the times when I'm working with my clients, I try to get them to target, right? I'll give this assessment, they fill it out, we go over it, and we'll target those areas and kind of work through that. And what that looks like is, are we talking? Absolutely. But when we talk about, like, when I was saying how it's not just about talk therapy, it's a more holistic approach. So we're talking about, how are you eating? How are you sleeping? Like, what is your goal for that? Like, all of
Mm,
these things start to come into play. What does your self-care routine look like? What does your budget look like? Are you even following a budget? Physical environment look like? Is it chaotic? Because we know, and research says, if our
mm,
physical space is chaotic, guess what's
mm,
happening up here? The
mm,
exact same thing. And there is a balance that you need to find, right? Because, yeah, that's not working out so well, right? And if we sit, and it's this idea of like mindfulness, right? And what I tell my clients is, mindfulness is the art of paying attention and being in the moment. And the key is with no judgment, right?
mm,
Because you
mm.
want to train your brain to be able to have no judgment and be in that moment, right? Whatever it is. And start asking yourself those questions. How am I feeling right now? Why is this bothering me? What is it that I need in this moment? Because oftentimes I'll ask my clients, what is it that you need right now?
They don't know.
No, have no idea. None. None. And it's a very, you would think it's a simple question, but no. And one of the hardest questions, I ask this question usually at the initial start of work: what brings you joy? And they're like,
Mm,
and instantly they go into, well, my family or my husband and my, let me break down joy. Joy is about inner peace. No
right.
one can make that happen for you. No thing can make that happen for you. What is it for you? What gets you, right? And then it's like, I have some clients who are still literally working on that question because they have no idea.
Because people have been taught that joy comes from others and joy comes from things. And so, and people have been taught that thinking about self is selfish. Putting self first is selfish. And so people rarely think about self. And
Mm.
when I teach leadership classes, that's one of the things I talk to the leaders about. You know, as a leader, how are you taking care of yourself? You know,
Right.
yes, you have to take care of your team and people who report to you. Yes, you got to respond to the people that's above you. But what about you? Right?
Right.
And people struggle with that conversation. And I one of the things I ask the leaders are, if you had to describe yourself in 3 words with no explanation, what 3 words would you use? People struggle with that.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I'm just, wow.
Yep. It's interesting that you bring that up because that too is one of the first exercises, and I'm giving you guys keys right now. It's one of the exercises that I do with my clients is I'll give them this homework assignment. And this homework assignment is to go, you can ask your family, friends, co-workers, colleagues, whomever, ask them to describe you in 3 words, right? No judgment, whatever is in the top of their head, just spit it out and don't question them, accept it because we're going to process it. And so when they come back with those 3 words, some of them are ticked off, didn't understand it, or take issue with some of that. And so we process it because one of the things that we do is, this is how others see you, but do you see yourself this way? Is this how you want to be seen? Like, and we start to unpack that because a whole lot comes out as a result of that. And so sometimes that helps shape, oh, well, dang, maybe maybe I do need to start here, right? Because this is the work that I need to do. So, yeah, it's
So
really interesting. I love that.
let me find out I got a little bit of therapist in me, because one of the things I say to people after we do that exercise is, I want you to keep those three words near you at your desk, wherever that is, right? And I want you to do an assessment and see, are those the characteristics that you are displaying with your team? Would they use some words similar to that to describe you? Now I have a girlfriend who say I'm a tax attorney. I'm all sorts of things. I can do a whole bunch of things. So now I'm just gonna add therapist to my list.
That's right.
Mortgage loan officer, real estate agent. So I'm just gonna add that to the list. But
That's
that
right.
is interesting. But you said something that I think we should emphasize.
Okay.
You said, look at your environment. And if your environment is cluttered,
Mm-hmm.
then your mind is cluttered.
Yep.
And you didn't use those exact words. That's just how I interpret it. But let's unpack that a little bit, because I don't think people make that connection. And of course, when I think about that, I think about the extreme of it with hoarders.
Right.
And then I think about the people who fall in the middle, right? You might not be a hoarder, but you still got a whole bunch of stuff in your environment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and why is it that people haven't made that connection?
Hmm. I think a lot of it goes back to these individuals having difficulties like in the balance of it all. And when I say balance, meaning difficulties letting things go, right?
Mm,
So even if you look at a space, right, now you know you don't need all of this stuff, right? Come on. And so I think like the connection is not made because they themselves, like in their head, they can't let go of things. And so
mm,
that is where the work begins. Like, let's talk through this, right? And when they start talking, it starts to like manifest, like, oh, I didn't even really think about that. Like,
mm,
and taking time to really kind of like process that, like, dang, my space is a little cluttered. I do feel a little unbalanced. Like, I do need to let some stuff go. How do we start that? Well, let's talk through it. Like, what are those things you feel like you're holding on to, right? I mean, we're talking about literally in the brain, right? Or in the mind. And then we reflect back to the physical space and let's look at this space. What are some of these things, right? I would even have them to do the toss, maybe keep, right? And so they start, putting stuff in these different piles. And then you go a little further, right? You start taking the piles. Okay, if this is the necessary keep, why are we keeping these things? To make
mm.
them talk through it. Because oftentimes they find, oh, well, yeah, I don't really need that. Right. And then the maybes is, well, maybe because this and this and this. Well, are you? Is this the plan? Like, do you have a plan for this? Is this well, no, not exactly. Yeah, you know what? And the idea is that by the time we finish talking through all of that, the keep pal is right,
Right.
because you're flushing and letting go of those things that no longer serve you or that you even need.
And
So,
so when people have stuff, like my stuff would be clothes. And
mhm.
yes, Monica, I need Dr. Monica, I need all my clothes. I did go through them and get rid of some clothes, but I still have a whole lot left. Because I need them.
You need them.
I do. I need them. Um, but and I could trace that back to my childhood. I know for sure where it came from. My mother was always about, when you leave this house, you will look like I'm your mama, and
Hmm.
I'll be looking any kind of way. And so I could trace it back. I know where it came from. And then with my dad, he is Mr. OG, like for real. Like when he gonna always be put together. And so I know where I got it from, right?
Right.
But do people feel a sense of overwhelmingness with all of that stuff?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because you know what happens with, okay, so when we feel stress is normal, right? We get stressed, we deal with it, we get through it, right? But when it gets to a level of being like overwhelmed, because people use the term being overwhelmed very loosely, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when I think of the word of being overwhelmed, overwhelmed is when you get to the point where you don't know what to do. It's like I'm
Mm-hmm.
stuck. I have not, I don't know what to do, right? So when we talk about like these spaces or people being in their head, that is literally what's happening. I am stuck. I don't know what to do with this stuff. I don't know where to go with these ruminating thoughts in my head. I am at the level of overwhelm where I am not functioning.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot function in this moment. But what happens is they take that and this is normalcy for me.
Mm-hmm.
This is not like, this is why you go to therapy so that you can process that and see that that is not at all what it is. Or this is just the way it is. This is just how it was. Does that make it right? Like, what are
Right.
we doing? What do you want to do? Is this where you want to be forever? In this state of being overwhelmed, where you get to the point where you're stuck and you don't know or don't know how to get out of it?
Mm-hmm. And don't know where
Yeah,
to start.
right.
Don't know where to start.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's another place too, that I find interesting about like clients that I work with. And these are kids in school as well as like my clients in private practice. One of the other exercises that I do with them is we look at what is your support network? What does that look like? Most people, mm-mm. And some people start naming people. And when we start getting into it, none of those people are your support. You think of like your family and those individuals because of who they are to you. This is my support. But oftentimes, those are the individuals that are escalating these behaviors in a way that is unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about what support looks like. And then when we list out these supports, we have supports for different things, right? Like, so I have this support. This is the person who I know without a doubt I can go to, I can talk and talk. This is the person that can show up for me, maybe in a financial way. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's just different levels of support, but you need to start thinking about that and identifying that for yourself. But people start naming people that's not, mm-mm,
That
mm-mm.
they've just been knowing their
Yeah,
whole life.
exactly.
And these people don't necessarily support you. It's interesting you brought up support because recently, me and some of my girlfriends and my sister, we were talking about support and support systems. And my sister and I were saying that we've always had the family support.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think to some degree that we take that for granted.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my girlfriends was saying that, you know, because we were kind of talking about how uh, somebody may be envious, right? Because of the support that we have for each other as siblings, and them not having that. And then my girlfriend was saying that, you know, people on the outside looking in see the level of support that we have for each other. And yeah, some people are going to feel envious of that because they don't have it. And so having a strong support system is critical. And like you said, you know, people going to support you in different ways, and you got to know who you could go to for what type of support. And people just don't have it. And people think, you know, because this is my family, my blood family, that they should be my support system, when in fact a lot of times that's not who's going to be your support system.
Right.
You
Right.
know, It's about creating those support systems outside of your family as well,
Right.
and being able to recognize what real support looks like, and not, people pretending to
Right.
support you.
Exactly.
Um, so let me ask this question: what's the relationship between a psychiatrist and a therapist, or the
Mm,
difference between the two?
you said the difference or their relationship?
Either. Well,
Okay.
actually both. Actually
Well,
both.
okay. So I have worked in outpatient, like mental health clinics. And so, with those types of environments, you have the therapists who are actually seeing the clients on a weekly or bi-weekly basis and providing like that level of therapeutic intervention, right? They get to know them, they build a rapport. And then you have the psychiatrists. They don't provide that level of support, but what they do, because they are the MD, they are the ones who prescribe like the medication, right? And
Mhm,
so their responsibility is due to do the medication management. So
mhm,
they are ensuring that the medication, if they're on medication, that they are taking it as prescribed, if there's any side effects, things like that. But the key is always, of course, because I'm biased, is with the therapist, because the therapist knows everything, right? And so I know I have worked with clients who are on medication. And one of the first things that I always tell them, especially if they're on medication, we need to keep a medication journal, right? And so that medication journal, because you should know everything about yourself, because when you show up at the doctor's and you're talking to the psychiatrist, you need to roll it out, reflect back, so that you're talking intelligently about how it's affecting you. Because the way that medication is prescribed is based on the general population, but we all
mhm,
know we're unique. And so that might be the general population, and research is saying 85%. Well, I'm not in the 85%, and these are the things that are happening. And I need some other level of support or some other information, or we need to have a conversation because this is not working for me. And so the psychiatrists are the MD that prescribes the medication and do medication management. And the therapists are the ones that's building those relationships, teaching coping strategies, implementing interventions. And those are the individuals who they tend to trust and tell these things to. And then we become this liaison for the psychiatrists and alike. So, yeah.
wow. That's good. That's good stuff. That's good for people to know,
Mm-hmm.
because I think some people may use it interchangeably. Or, when said about back in the day, particularly in our community, be like, you need to go see a psychiatrist. We ain't know what we were saying, right? Because that's not who they need to go see. You crazy. You need to go. And it's not crazy. You just may have some type of chemical imbalance that's,
Right.
impacting your thoughts. Um,
Yeah. And then for psychiatrists, the other piece of that is you may see psychiatrists like in hospitals or even some in private practice who may see clients, but they don't typically see a lot. And the other thing to note is when it comes to psychologists and psychiatrists, when we talk about them being African American, like in our country, I think it's like 6% Black
mm,
psychiatrists and psychologists. It's a really
mm,
small percentage of Black ones. So, yeah, you're not going to see many of them at all.
wow.
And they don't typically see clients. I mean, in the larger institutions, yeah, they will. But I know in these outpatient mental health clinics in our communities, they're doing
Hmm.
medication management typically.
And our time has really gone by quickly, but I want to ask you this one last question.
Mhm.
Do you have any ideas, if we lived in a perfect world in the United States, what should we be doing as a country to support people with these severe mental health issues? I
Oh,
won't call them issues, challenges.
yeah,
Um, when I think about people with like schizophrenia, or, these like really severe ones, what should we
yeah.
be doing as a country?
Yeah, and it's so unfortunate. I was literally just talking to someone about like my ideas, because I always have some kind of ideas, but when it comes to those individuals with severe mental illness, you know how we build like these prisons?
Come
There
on.
are, right? So I believe that we, can start building these wellness facilities where we can like provide these level of services to individuals, right? And it should encompass like a more holistic approach. Yes, again, we're doing talk therapy, but so many people are responding to different ways of healing instead of
Hmm.
just talk therapy or the medication. Now, do we need it? Yeah, but it's an individual decision that you make. But I believe instead of, well, if you need prisons, okay, but we also need to start building like these wellness centers. And I was even talking to my brother. I have a brother who lives in Atlanta, and he heads up a nonprofit organization for homeless people. And him and I was putting our brains together. And one of the things that we were coming up with is like pop up therapeutic like sessions where they can go in, have a private like pod or something, and pop the screen, because we could do telehealth,
Hmm.
and there's someone who can talk to them right then and there, like if they need to
Great
talk
idea.
something or go through something. Yep.
That's a great idea. And I think, more about the adults, because at that point, they are, and I don't know why the laws are this way, but they are in control of their being when a lot of times they are not able to control their being. And
Mm-hmm.
so for us to have a system in place that doesn't encourage um, parents, particularly parents, to have some level of input into what happens and relying on families who are uneducated in this area, unprepared in this area, and and in some cases unwilling and unable, right, to provide the support that the person needs. It to me is horrible, and I just hate to see that that's happening in our country. And
Right.
so with that being said, our time has gone by really quickly. This is a great conversation, and
Yes.
I would like to thank you, Dr. Monica, for your willingness to come on here and help us think through this whole therapy thing from a holistic approach, and really being able to start the conversation for those who, for whatever reasons, haven't started thinking about seeking out therapy,
Mhm.
and understanding the value that it can add to your healing journey.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Yes, I appreciate it. Yeah.
And so I am going to ask you to ask yourself, what the hell? I want everybody to lean in and listen closely. If Donald J. Trump and the Republicans, if Donald wins the White House and the Republicans control the House or the Senate, because we didn't go out to vote, here's some things we can expect to happen. There will be no more elections. Donald J. Trump has already told us that out his mouth. He told his supporters if they vote this time, they won't ever have to vote again. That he means us too. That health care that we have, particularly those who are on Obamacare, that goes away. If you have any pre-existing conditions, you will not be eligible for health care. And most people in America has a pre-existing condition. Your taxes are going to go through the roof because of tariffs. Tariffs are taxes that are placed on goods coming into this country to other countries. Those countries are going to turn around and place those tariffs taxes onto the consumer. That's you and me. So everything is going to go up. There will be lots of chaos. There will be no more childless cat ladies because they are going to make sure that the women in this country have as many babies as they can have. More women are going to die during pregnancy because they won't be able to get the health care that they need. There will be a nationwide abortion restriction without exceptions. So anybody who is violated will have to carry the baby to term. And they don't care how old the person is. This little girl, 10 years old, if she is violated and end up pregnant, she will become a mother at 10. There will be immunity for cops who unalive citizens. Complete immunity. And you know that speaks more for Black and brown people than it does anybody else in this country. And for all of the African American people who are talking about voting for Donald J. Trump, just know that it will touch your family and your friends because these cops are already out of control. And they will be even more out of control when they know that they have immunity. Just today, Donald Trump was caught on a hot mic talking about he wants to require U.S. citizens to stand and salute him when he enters a space like the citizens of North Korea has to do when Kim Jong-un walk into a space. Now, when you go to the polls, don't just think about yourself and don't just hang your vote on one issue. Think about the big picture so you won't find you asking yourself, what the hell? This is on us and us alone. We as a citizen group can stop all of this from happening and make Donald Trump and MAGA go away. This is on us. So I'm going to ask you right now, what the hell? Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate your support and I look forward to having you tune in 2 weeks from today. I will be coming to you live from the Outer Banks of North Carolina and we're going to have a sister show. Thank you for joining and participating in Let's Get Into It. I want to thank my special guest for being brave enough to get into it. Without you, these conversations cannot happen. Remember, different viewpoints, respect, and love are the foundations of Let's Get Into It. If there's a topic you think I should discuss, drop me a recommendation. If you're interested in being my special guest, let me know because we can and will get into it. Have a great day on purpose, and I look forward to your continued engagement and support as we get into it.